Hi guys, Jedi Jim in the neighborhood here. Kind of a throwback to folks that grew up with Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood. First of all, I think I mentioned at the end of the last video, this is number 224, so it's a couple of months ahead of the 5-year jumps that I've been doing because I don't happen to have that particular issue. In fact, I think I just put a bid on it on eBay last week for 3 different modules that I didn't have for like 99 cents. Got outbid by a nickel. Bummer. But generally I try not to spend more than 50 cents or $1 an issue if I'm picking up old issues, because there's it's basically just that collector virus in me. Yeah, we're 5 years ahead of the last place that we discussed. White Dwarf's logo itself. Now the thing across the top, it says the Games Workshop Monthly Gaming Supplement and Citadel Miniatures Catalog. So definitely GW at this point has gone full-fledged into the fact that it's basically tabletop wargaming, and very little in here about role-playing or anything else. They're dedicated to the miniatures and to the tabletop wargaming. This is really a nice example here of non-metallic paint of metals with the different way that the light casts some small sharp, you probably can't see that on the flip, the detail. Some real nice artwork here. Siege are the war rules that are really being pushed in this particular issue, and really from this point on I think you're pretty much going to see the same layout. White Dwarf is pretty much settled into the same content. It just changes the factions or whatever new models it's pushing. Probably the only thing that you might see in these older ones is a few out-of-print games, but I don't think there's going to be that much difference. But I said I'd jump every 5 years, so I'll still do one for 2003 and 2008. Necromundia, I've got that one. That was kind of an interesting game, a little bit more squad oriented rather than full-blown armies, and you're running through smaller terrain like towns and that type of thing. Some great models. A faction that I liked associated with the Imperial Guard. I think it's more like a support group or ally. The Tallarn, I believe it's Tallarn, T-A-L-L-A-R-N. Really like their desert fighters. I picked up a few of their desert fighters. They've got an article in here about them, and this is one of the issues that had some extensive photos of the Legion of the Damned, which is a nice Space Crusade chapter that has got some cool skulls and stuff like that. I don't know that you really say nice for skulls and death, but here are some of the Legion of the Damned models. It's interesting that on, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but whenever you're doing a flat surface or just slightly rounded surface of flames, it tends to be done backwards from red at the bottom going to yellow at the top, when usually if you're doing a 3-dimensional flame that is a torch or something, that you put the heat or the lightest colors to the interior and pull the darker colors to the outside. Same thing with lava. You're usually white and yellow to the center, coming out to red, orange, and then finally maybe black on the edge. So I just think it's interesting that whenever you get into a flat surface and you're doing this, it tends to be reversed to the other way around. I'm not sure if that's just artistic license or the way it started or what. Siege is being shown here. The Warhammer Fortress, the 3D terrain that we talked about in the last issue. This has been posted. This is back when GW, I noticed the more recent issues, they don't post their prices anymore. Considering some of the prices, I'd be ashamed to post them in writing too, but these are all posted here. So this particular set was $120, which is pretty expensive back then, but that's almost a full castle and a nice piece. But most of the figures in here will have the actual price posted on them. And actually, to be honest, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they probably sent their catalogs to print so early, and they're supporting the models that are being released at the same time, that I don't even know that they've established the pricing for them at the time they send their catalogs to print, so maybe that's why they do it. It's just me being petty, you know, thinking that there would be any shame there in their management. Necromunda, they had the pit slaves. Picked up quite a few of those models. I liked that. Even though they're out of print games, I've noticed that if you go to their website, like in the case of Gorka Morka and Necromunda, Mordheim, sometimes they have the rules available for download, so you can still get support for the game, even though they may not be actually issuing more models and new releases of the game. Came out with a comic book, or at the time too, it looks like they're already up to issue number 6 on that, a monthly comic book. But why wouldn't you when you have the kind of fluff and the great artist and vision for the worlds that they've created. Warhammer Siege Works. Looked like the focus primarily was definitely on the fantasy aspect of it rather than the 401k. This is something else that I've always liked, and one of the first things that got me interested in possibly doing terrain for the table. Our RPGA back in the day, you know, we would throw a book out for a hill and use dominoes for doors and walls, and maybe we just throw out some terrain, actual train, model train trees or something like that for a forest, just to set up a little bit of, but you can really carry it someplace special with tabletop gaming today, with all the terrain that's being built and the really talented people out there like Terrainaholic and Terranscapes and Blue Table Painting, and people that just Terrain Noob. If you've seen their stuff, it's just phenomenal. There's a full spread on the Fortress, and like I said, it is a hobby magazine, and it's pushing their product, so you get their product displayed in the best possible way. Excellently painted figures, extremely well photographed, showing them in the midst of battle with all of the models out there, kind of giving you an idea of just how many models you should own if you're going to be playing the game. Another nice terrain making article here about moats. Then getting in some of the fluff for the Legion of the Damned. There's a nice full 2-page spread with the vehicles. Again, if you'll notice, I don't know if you can really tell on the flip, I apologize, I really can't do close-ups and stuff, but if you notice here, again, you got kind of the red going to orange, going to yellow on all the flat surfaces for the flame. But these are really cool with the skull, armor, helmets. Real good eye candy for that particular faction. Trying to move on a little bit faster because I really don't think there's that much of a difference. It looks like the whoever the inker was, or the artist was on this, is the same guy that used to do the the Barbarian comics, but don't see that as much in the newer versions of White Dwarf. Mordheim, another out-of-print game. I didn't buy it. I bought some of the figures from it, but I didn't actually buy the box game, which I wish I had, because they had some interesting cardboard terrain in there. And that's something that I am a little disappointed with over the years. It seemed like the earlier releases of these kind of games included terrain pieces, whether they were cardboard and 2D, and they really got up to the point to when they were doing things like Battle for Mackridge. You had some nice 3D terrain in there, and the newest releases hardly have any terrain in them at all. But since they sell terrain separately, I guess I can understand that from a business standpoint. You don't want to include something in there when you can charge and have it added in later. I think these are the Imperial Fists. Yes, those are the Imperial Fists. I've always liked the yellow gold of those. I think those really pop on a table when they're out there, and there's some guys that have done some excellent paint jobs on those in the YouTube community. Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy now is all about battles. It's not about role-playing. Heraldry's neat. Again, I apologize for the shadow from my tripod showing across there. But heraldry on the barding and the shields has always been a way of taking the game models to a new level. People that do it freehand, boy, I really appreciate what you do, and it's pretty amazing what some people can do on such a small canvas. This is where I really started getting into the terrain also. They would do such a good job of displaying the models in some type of a post-apocalyptic, broke-down, war-torn building. Battle Magic, I think that was in the 5 years ago. That was being displayed. It's still being displayed. Here's the color schemes. It is Tallarn, T-A-L-L-A-R-N. A desert focused faction. Look like they have the Sisters of Battle. They've been painted up in their color, and then some of them in the black. Vehicles have been painted up in the Tallarn color scheme, but these were my favorites. The turban wrapped heads with the rifles, and I did end up buying a squad of those, or some type of a box, a number of those, but of course they're still unpainted. The plastics are starting to show up quite a bit here, the larger regiment boxes and stuff. This is Chaos. Always displaying and showing the folks having really good time at the hobby centers that are playing more and more a role. People coming and playing at the store. Here's an interesting walker. The newest releases kind of look a little bit more like the Star Wars vehicles, in that you've got like a plated carriage at the top of it, but this one you've got an exposed guy who basically looks like he's just sitting atop a pair of mechanized legs with a nice big weapon. But the newest one sees